Persuasion begins not with the excitement of first love, but with the quiet ache of love remembered. 8 years before the story opens, Anne Elliot was deeply attached to a young naval officer named Frederick Wentworth. He loved her, and she loved him. But Anne, still young and guided by the advice of those around her, was persuaded not to marry him. He had no fortune, no established position, and no clear promise of future security. To Anne's family and to Lady Russell, the friend who acted almost as a second mother to her, the match seemed imprudent. Anne submitted to their judgment and broke the engagement. Wentworth left wounded in pride and feeling, determined to prove himself in the world. Anne remained behind, carrying the memory of that lost happiness. By the time the novel begins, she is no longer a romantic girl, but a woman of quiet sorrow, maturity, and inward strength. This is a story not of beginning love, but of whether love, once broken by fear and influence, can survive the passing of years. And belongs to the Elliot family, a family of old social standing and inherited pride. Her father, Sir Walter Elliot, is handsome, vain, and absurdly devoted to rank, appearance, and the importance of his name. He values beauty, title, and distinction far more than wisdom or feeling. Anne's older sister Elizabeth resembles him in this pride and selfishness. Both are preoccupied with status and offended by anything that threatens their sense of superiority. And, by contrast, possesses none of their vanity. She sees clearly, feels deeply, and judges with humility. Yet within her own family she is often overlooked, as if quiet intelligence were less valuable than show. Austen paints the Elliots with sharp irony. They are respectable by appearance, but thin in substance. Their concern with dignity hides poor judgment and financial carelessness. In this family, Anne's moral seriousness has no audience. She lives surrounded by people who do not understand her value, and that isolation gives her character a quiet melancholy from the very start. The story begins with a practical problem that exposes the weakness beneath Sir Walter's elegance. The Elliot family has been living beyond its means, and their finances can no longer support the expensive comfort they insist upon maintaining. Rather than reform his habits with dignity, Sir Walter resists every unpleasant reality until a solution must be forced upon him. Kellynch Hall, the family estate, will have to be let to tenants while Sir Walter and Elizabeth move to Bath, a city better suited to their love of display. And has little desire to go, but as always, her preferences carry little weight. The decision matters for another reason as well. The tenants who will lease Kellynch are Admiral Croft and his wife, Mrs. Croft, and Mrs. Croft happens to be the sister of Captain Wentworth. At once, the past Anne has kept quietly buried begins to stir. The very house she is leaving will be occupied by people connected to the man she once loved. The world that had seemed safely closed is beginning to open again. Anne Elliot is one of Jane Austen's most inward heroines. She is neither dazzling nor socially triumphant. She does not command rooms, charm everyone she meets, or delight in public attention. Instead, her strength is moral and emotional. She listens more than she speaks. She sees more than others guess. She endures neglect without bitterness and disappointment without self-display. 8 years of regret have deepened rather than hardened her. She has learned patience, sympathy, and a kind of wisdom that comes only through sorrow born with dignity. Others in the novel often fail to notice her, especially at first, but the reader is invited to see from the beginning that Anne's quietness is not emptiness. It is depth. Her story is especially moving because she has already suffered before the novel even starts. We do not watch her first illusions break. We meet her after the breaking, when memory and resignation have already shaped her life. Yet beneath that resignation, hope has not been entirely extinguished. Captain Frederick Wentworth soon re-enters Anne's world, and his return changes the emotional atmosphere of the novel at once. He is no longer the poor and uncertain young officer whom Anne was persuaded to reject. He has made a fortune through success in the Navy and now returns with confidence, distinction, and social desirability. He is welcomed everywhere. Families with daughters notice him immediately. He is cheerful, handsome, energetic, and accomplished. But his manner toward Anne is painful in its restraint. He is polite but distant. He does not seek her company, does not treat her as someone of special meaning, and seems determined to show that the past has no hold over him. For Anne, this is both understandable and deeply wounding. She never stopped valuing him. She knows she injured him, even if she acted from a sincere sense of duty. Now she must see him again, transformed into the man everyone admires, while enduring the possibility that she has lost him forever. Much of the early action takes place among the Musgroves, a neighboring family whose lively household contrasts strongly with the cold vanity of the Elliots. The Musgroves are not especially refined in the grand sense, but they are warm, affectionate, and full of ordinary life. Anne is welcomed there with more kindness than she often receives at home. The family includes two young women, Henrietta and Louisa Musgrove, both lively and cheerful and both soon drawn to Wentworth's charm. Anne watches all this with composure, though inwardly it costs her dearly. The Musgroves' energy reminds the reader that life has continued for others while Anne has lived partly in memory. Wentworth seems especially at ease among them, as though he prefers uncomplicated youth and easy admiration to the quiet, regret-shaped character Anne now possesses. Austen allows the pain of this contrast to work slowly, and is not dramatic in her jealousy. She suffers through observation, through small exclusions, through the sight of being replaced in a role once hers. One of the novel's most important themes emerges through Wentworth's conversations with Louisa Musgrove. At this stage, Wentworth speaks admiringly of firmness of character. He praises decisiveness, strength of will, and the refusal to be easily influenced by others, and cannot fail to hear the meaning beneath these remarks. 8 years earlier, she allowed herself to be persuaded against him. He still seems to value that moment as proof of weakness. Louisa, eager to please and naturally spirited, responds enthusiastically to this ideal of firmness. She becomes a kind of living contrast to and in Wentworth's eyes, or so Anne believes. But Austen is quietly preparing a deeper lesson. Firmness is not always wisdom. Being unyielding is not always strength. What matters is not merely resisting influence, but knowing when judgment should stand and when it should listen. Anne had once been persuaded, perhaps too much. Louisa will soon show the danger of admiring stubbornness for its own sake. Though she is often overlooked in social settings and repeatedly proves herself the most sensible and useful person in moments that matter, she comforts little Charles Musgrove when others are impatient. She supports Mary, her vain and complaining younger sister, through endless domestic irritations. She manages practical difficulties calmly while others become excited or self-absorbed. Anne's value is most visible when genuine feeling or clear thinking is required. This is central to Austen's design. The heroine is not the loudest or most immediately admired woman in the room. She is the one whose steadiness reveals itself in responsibility, sympathy, and judgment. The world around her may prize beauty, rank, and liveliness, but real worth appears in conduct. Anne's quiet usefulness becomes one of the ways Wentworth slowly begins, without perhaps intending it, to see her again with old respect. A turning point comes during an excursion to Lyme, a seaside town whose vivid setting brings a temporary lightness to the narrative. The sea, the changing company, and the freshness of the place create a sense of movement and possibility. At Lyme, Anne encounters Captain Benwick and Captain Harville, naval friends of Wentworth whose warmth and seriousness broaden the novel's emotional world. Here too, Anne meets the young and graceful Mrs. Croft more intimately, and once again sees a marriage built on mutual respect and companionship. For a brief time, the excursion allows different relationships and possibilities to emerge. Yet underneath the sociable pleasure lies a growing tension around Louisa Musgrove's eagerness to prove herself bold and resolute. The ideal of firmness, encouraged by Wentworth's own language, is about to be tested in a physical and moral way none of them expect. At Lyme, Louisa insists on jumping from the steps into Wentworth's arms, a playful act she has performed before. But this time she misjudges the moment, falls, and strikes her head severely. The accident is sudden and terrifying. In the confusion that follows, characters reveal themselves clearly. Some panic. Some become useless. Anne, however, remains calm. She gives sensible instructions, studies those around her, and acts with quiet authority. Wentworth is deeply shaken, not only by Louisa's injury, but by the realization that his own praise of obstinate firmness may have helped encourage exactly the recklessness that caused it. The moment is one of the most important in the novel. It exposes the danger of confusing determination with wisdom, and it also places Anne in a new light. In crisis, she is the strongest person present. Her self-command, once perhaps mistaken for dullness, now appears as true strength. After the accident at Lyme, something begins to change in Wentworth's view of Anne. He has seen her usefulness, composure, and maturity at close range. He has also begun to feel the emptiness of the careless admiration surrounding him. Louisa's injury interrupts the flirtatious momentum that had seemed to be carrying him toward a possible engagement. Instead of confirming his interest in youthful liveliness, the episode forces him into deeper reflection. Anne, who once appeared to him as the woman who failed him through persuasion, now begins to emerge again as the woman of judgment, feeling, and moral steadiness he once loved. Austen handles this shift delicately. Wentworth does not suddenly confess renewed love. Rather, his behavior grows more thoughtful, less easy, more attentive in ways that suggest his feelings are no longer settled where he believed them to be. The action later moves to Bath, a city that embodies many of the novel's social tensions. Bath is elegant, fashionable, crowded with rank and performance. It is a place where people display themselves, form acquaintances quickly, and often mistake appearances for value. Sir Walter and Elizabeth are delighted by it because it suits their vanity perfectly. Anne, however, feels little attraction to its surfaces. In Bath, she is again surrounded by people who value what she least cares for: status, beauty, and public notice. Yet Bath is also where the emotional threads of the novel tighten. Anne's isolation becomes more noticeable, her inward life more intense, and Wentworth's renewed presence more charged. The city allows misunderstandings to flourish, but it also brings long-delayed truths toward expression. In Bath, Anne becomes better acquainted with her cousin, Mr. Elliot, heir to Kellynch Hall. On the surface, he appears everything Sir Walter values and more. He is polished, well-spoken, attentive, and socially agreeable. Even Anne is at first disposed to think well of him. Unlike so many people around her, he seems to appreciate her company and understand her intelligence. Others soon begin to imagine a match between them. Such a marriage would restore family harmony, secure the inheritance line, and satisfy Sir Walter's social ambitions. But Austen, true to form, warns us not to trust too quickly in graceful appearances. Mr. Elliot's attention is flattering, but there is a cool calculation beneath it. Anne senses that something is missing, some warmth or openness that would make admiration safe. Her growing relationship with him becomes another test of her judgment, and a reminder to the reader that charm and moral worth do not always travel together. A crucial source of truth in Bath is Mrs. Smith, an old-school friend of Anne's living in reduced circumstances. Once prosperous, now widowed, ill, and financially distressed, Mrs. Smith occupies a much humbler position than Anne's family would value. Yet she possesses clear intelligence and moral insight. Through her, Anne learns the truth about Mr. Elliot. Far from being the honorable, reformed gentleman he appears to be, he is selfish, calculating, and motivated by interest. His attention to and arises not from love, but from convenience and social advantage. He wishes to prevent Sir Walter from remarrying unwisely and threatening his inheritance, and he sees and as useful to that design. This revelation is important not only for the plot, but for the novel's moral texture. Once again, Austen contrasts external polish with inner worth. Mrs. Smith, though poor and socially diminished, becomes a source of truth. Mr. Elliot, though elegant and well-placed, is spiritually shallow. By this point in the novel, Anne's understanding of love has deepened far beyond youthful romantic hope. She still loves Wentworth, but her love is no longer tied to fantasy, pride, or expectation. It has endured through loss, silence, and the long discipline of memory. She does not demand that the past be undone easily. She does not imagine herself entitled to happiness simply because she has suffered. This mature quality of Anne's love is one of the novel's most moving features. She remains capable of intense feeling, but that feeling is joined to humility and realism. In contrast to the easy vanity of those around her, Anne's constancy feels almost sacred. She is loved not for excitement, but for the value she recognized in Wentworth's character. That value, despite everything, has never disappeared. One of the most powerful moments in Persuasion occurs not through open declaration, but through overheard conversation. Anne is speaking with Captain Harville about whether men or women love longest when hope is gone. Harville argues warmly for the constancy of men. And, drawing from her own hidden life, speaks for the constancy of women, especially women who are forced into silence and waiting. Her words carry all the force of her own experience. She has lived that constancy. She has loved without renewal, without assurance, without public claim. Nearby, Wentworth hears her. In that moment, Anne's private truth becomes audible to the man who most needs to understand it. Austen compresses 8 years of feeling into this conversation. It is at once philosophical, emotional, and deeply personal. Anne's argument is not a performance. It is the honest expression of a heart that never ceased to remember. Moved beyond silence, Wentworth writes and a letter, one of the most famous love letters in English literature. In it, he confesses that he is once again, and indeed still, deeply in love with her. He tells her that he has listened, hoped, and suffered. He writes that she pierces his soul, and that he is half agony, half hope. The power of the letter lies not only in its beauty, but in what it resolves. For years, both have lived under misunderstanding, and believing she injured him beyond repair, Wentworth believing perhaps that she could not still care. The letter breaks through pride, reserve, and the accumulated distance of time. It gives language to what has long remained hidden. For Anne, reading it is a moment of emotional release after years of endurance. At last, the love she buried has answered her from the world outside her own heart. After Wentworth's letter, Anne and Wentworth finally speak openly. Their reconciliation is not the reunion of two impulsive young lovers stepping back into an untouched dream. It is richer than that. They meet again as people shaped by experience, regret, and growth. Anne explains the sincerity of her former decision, and Wentworth comes to understand that her persuasion was not faithlessness, but submission to duty and guidance at an age when such influence still held power. And, for her part, recognizes the pain she caused him and the justice of his long resentment. What matters now is not that the past can be erased, but that it can be understood. Their love survives not because nothing separated them, but because what was deepest in it endured separation. Anne and Wentworth are one of Austen's most mature couples because their union is based not merely on attraction, but on tested esteem. Wentworth has energy, competence, warmth, and emotional depth beneath his earlier hurt, and has steadiness, intelligence, tenderness, and a capacity for faithful feeling unmatched by anyone around her. Both have changed. Wentworth has learned that firmness without understanding can become harshness, and has learned to trust the worth of her own heart more fully. Together they represent the possibility that love may survive error if both people remain worthy of it. Their reunion feels especially satisfying because it is not won through social ambition, family approval, or convenience. It is won through truth. Lady Russell, who once advised and to refuse Wentworth, is not treated as a villain. She genuinely loved and believed she was protecting her. Austen is careful here. Persuasion is not a simple warning against listening to others. Advice can be sincere and still be wrong. Social judgment can appear prudent and yet fail to account for the deepest truths of character and feeling. Lady Russell valued rank, stability, and connection. She did not yet know how truly worthy Wentworth was, nor how enduring Anne's love would prove. The novel's title points to this complexity. Anne was persuaded, and that persuasion altered the course of her life. But the lesson is not that all persuasion is evil. It is that the heart and conscience must not be permanently governed by external pressure when they know something essential to be true. Persuasion is also one of Austen's most striking novels in its treatment of class and social change. The old landed world of Sir Walter Elliot is shown as vain, stagnant, and morally thin. By contrast, the naval world to which Wentworth, Admiral Croft, and Captain Harville belong feels active, merit-based, and humane. These are people whose rank has been earned through service, courage, and labor rather than merely inherited. The Crofts, in particular, offer an image of marriage based on companionship and mutual respect. In this contrast, Austen quietly suggests that worth may be shifting away from inherited pride toward practical character, and belongs by birth to the old order, yet by sympathy and moral instinct, she belongs much more naturally among the generous and capable people of the naval world. Her union with Wentworth carries, therefore, not only romantic but symbolic meaning, and does not triumph in the loud way some heroines do. She does not defeat enemies publicly, win social contests, or suddenly become the center of admiration. Her triumph is quieter and in some ways greater. She remains herself, thoughtful, self-controlled, compassionate, and through that constancy, she gains at last the happiness once denied her. The world around her may never fully appreciate her as it should, but Wentworth does, and the reader certainly does. Anne's reward feels morally satisfying because it is not based on transformation into someone more fashionable or forceful. She is valued at last for what she has always truly been. One reason Persuasion continues to move readers so deeply is that it is a novel of second chances. It asks whether lost happiness can ever be recovered, whether time deepens love or only buries it, and whether people who once failed each other may meet again with greater wisdom. Many love stories celebrate youth, first feeling, and immediate union. Persuasion does something rare. It honors patience, memory, and the possibility of renewal after disappointment. And Wentworth do not return to each other unchanged. They return as better, fuller, sadder, and wiser people. Their happiness, therefore, feels not naive, but earned. In the end, Persuasion is a novel about constancy, judgment, and the courage to trust what one knows in the heart. It shows how pride in rank can blind, how good advice can mislead, how appearances conceal selfishness, and how real worth often moves quietly through the world. Above all, it tells the story of a woman who loved faithfully, suffered silently, and at last was seen and chosen not in spite of her depth, but because of it. And Elliot's journey is not dramatic in the ordinary sense, yet it may be one of Austen's most profound. She teaches that tenderness is not weakness, that patience is not passivity, and that love, when joined to character and truth, may endure longer than youth, silence, and time itself.